Well, welcome to an interview with Julie Callaway. Julie is the president of BDN Industrial Hygiene Consultants, and she's worked there for 33 years, but she's been the owner since 2020. And you might recently have heard of the Michigan Central Station renovation project. That's something that Julie was involved in. She made sure it was safe, and her company and her team did that, so we're real proud of that. And she's also a co-chair of the WBE Forum that plans the events here in West Michigan and things that you can attend as well. So we're talking about leading the organization, strengthening your management team, being an inspiring leader and culture. I can't think of a better person to speak on these things than Julie. Welcome, Julie. All right, I'm going to ask you some questions that I think will help our cohort understand more about those topics. So let's start with, you purchased the company you worked for. Still, there were things you needed to do to launch from your leadership perspective. What items were on your checklist?
So I can start with like what we do, what BDN is. So we're a health and safety consulting firm. We specialize in OSHA compliance monitoring, and then we do environmental or hazardous materials inspections for hazardous materials for renovation and demolition work. So we're consulting. So we have multiple offices: Lansing, Grand Rapids, Allen Park, and Portage, which is near Kalamazoo. So we have people. Those are most of our processes involve people and OSHA high regulation activities. So basically, when I took over, a lot of my whole theory for taking over was, why do we do what we do? And if the answer was because it's always been done that way, it went on a list. So I kind of made a list of why our company started in 1980. And so it had been established and been around for a long time. So the way business is done in the 80s isn't necessarily the way you do it in 2020. So a lot of the way we did work needed to be updated or changed, or get some thoughts from our employees on how we could do things better. So that was really the way that, I started with what's going on, and then it became prioritizing those, and really anything to do with people was the priority. So if it touched the people, my employees first, then we started working on those types of processes first. So
I love to hear that, and that really speaks to culture and the healthiness of your culture. So you're not only keeping businesses healthy and safe and buildings, but also your culture. So that's really great. And well, you said something there I wanted to talk about. I think it is that you were watching out for your employees. What were your initial metrics for measuring success, and have they evolved over time?
So it's a very interesting question. Thinking about this one a little bit. So when I took over in 2020, I actually was COVID. So I became a certified company and was learning a lot about what was online at that point, because COVID hit. So a lot of things had gone online. So I learned about the EOS system through WeIgnite, through WeBank. And so I was looking for a way to, a platform, right? There's operating systems out there. I was not a business major, so I didn't know that there were operating systems for companies. I didn't know that. I had never experienced that here. So having metrics, we never used metrics to figure out how we were doing. We never set goals. I'm not really sure how we made it for so long without having those things. I think it was just doing the right thing with the right people, and you have a good culture, and I think that you can sustain time. But for us now, using what EOS system calls us scorecards, it is the measurables that we put into place to help us look at making those revenue goals with the profitability goals, managing our overtime so that we can make sure that no one is over, over a certain amount of hours or percentage per week, so that we maintain that and not burn out anybody. We also look at the measurables can go from the top down. So from a leadership perspective, all the way to the field people and what are the metrics they need, which could be as simple as the report. Once we're done with the job, is the report out and in the hands of the customer within 30 days, so that we're efficient in our process and our flow. And then we communicate that. We also are very heavy on quality control. So we have a lot of quality control issues that come up with each individual employee. So we're able to track that on a weekly basis as well. So those are some of the metrics, excuse me, that we use weekly, basically, to talk to our staff all the way up and down through all the departments.
So when you say quality control relative to employees, what does that mean?
So we do fiber counting. So one of the services that we do is asbestos air monitoring. So when the contractor is an abatement contractor is on site to remove the hazardous materials, the asbestos particularly, asbestos is not a man-made fiber, it's a naturally found fiber. So similar to like fiberglass, which is man-made, people know of that. So we actually have trained all of our employees to be able to fiber count. It's a NIOSH 7400 method that allows them to use a microscope. So part of the equipment is a microscope for every employee. We take air samples as they are removing the material safely, and then we actually count on site. So we analyze those samples during that process. So the quality control is required through OSHA, that we have to participate in certain types of proficiency analytical testing. So we have to show that we count the same. It's like calibrating yourself. If you send something to a laboratory, you assume when you get a result back that the equipment is calibrated correctly, the machine that runs the analysis is calibrated. Well, in this case, we're the machine that reads it. So we need to make sure that our microscope is calibrated correctly and that each one of our employees, the machine that's actually counting the sample, meets certain quality control requirements. So it's highly, highly regulated in that case.
Well, thank you for that explanation. I think that really helped. Now, becoming president and owner in 2020 had to be quite a challenge. So today, I'm guessing you're a different leader than you were in 2020. How did your role evolve, and how do you think that you approach things differently today than you did in 2020?
So I started with BDN in 1991, and I had just graduated from college. And so I started boots on the ground as the technician doing the air monitoring, learning to do the air monitoring, the inspections, everything. So this, I like to say, is my first job. I've not really worked any place else. I have started my whole career with BDN. And so I guess when you think back to being an employee in an organization that's always been a small business, it's always been small. We have 16 people now in these 4 office locations, so we're bigger than we've been ever since I've worked here, but still small. So the ownership transition definitely is a mindset. I would say as an employee, I always felt ownership in a sense to take care of my coworkers, to work well with them, to look out for the customer, right? I felt a sense of ownership, and I think some people can relate to that. And maybe they relate more when they say, I don't like this company and I'm not really vetted, or I'm not really like invested is the word I'm thinking. You know, I'm not really invested in this company. I could go work someplace else. For me, I always felt a sense of ownership here and importance. And so becoming the owner in 2020, I remember sitting January 1st, I came into the office and I sat here and I was like, oh gosh, now what? Now what do I do? Like I was supposed to feel different. And I didn't know. I was like, oh, I know I need to start getting organized. I need to do something different. You know, I wanted, now it was just me. So I think the transition has become one of a sense of responsibility, because when you're an owner, when you're not an owner, you are an employee and you have ownership because you want to do a good job
Mm.
and show up every day. Now, as the owner, I have the responsibility of people's lives. Their families count on getting a paycheck, and I want people to be happy because we have to work. If you didn't have to work, people wouldn't work. So I want people to feel like when they come to work, they're fulfilled with something or feel supported, and then can go home to their families, and want to be here. Because if you have to work, I'd love it that you'll want to be where you're working. Does that make sense? So it's a
Yes.
different sense of responsibility.
So now that within the time period, though, as you've gained more experience, do you still do things the same as you did in 2020, or have you changed some?
Definitely changed. I think implementing the EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, into BDN, gave us such a way to communicate. I'm a huge communicator. I probably over communicate sometimes, and I felt like I needed a way to bring in everyone so they heard the same message before I even knew what EOS was. So really what EOS has helped me do is get organized as a company, right? Like really look at accountability charts, which are slightly different than organizational charts, where that like I wear the HR hat, but I also wear the sales hat. And so really clearly defining what I need to do in each one of those roles, instead of every morning getting up and they're just all meshed together. So every day I'm learning to continually separate those, I'll say departments, right? But I might be the only one in that department, but there's still departments just like a large company would have. And I always would say, hey, we're a small business, but I want to operate like a big business. And when I say that, I don't mean we want to have all of the bureaucratic part of a large business, but we want to have the structure and somewhat that organization that you see in big businesses that a lot of times are lacking in small businesses, because I love science and that's what I love to do. I'm not a business major, and I have to learn about those things to become a better owner, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. And I'm so glad you said those things because they are important. And I'm going to pull a book off the shelf here. I don't know if I think I'll be able to show it.
Yes,
Yeah.
traction.
So I'm just showing that so our business owners can see that this is the book that talks about the training that Julie took. So if you can't go to the training, you can definitely go uh, get this book. It's on Amazon for sure, and probably in some of the major bookstores as
It
well.
is. Yeah, and WeBank offers that We Ignite program somewhat regularly, annually. I'm not sure if it's twice annually, but it is definitely, even if it's not your cup of tea and it's what you don't want, it's still the book is great. You can self-implement, you can implement with an implementer. I use an implementer that comes in just so that I'm held accountable, because I want to show that accountability to the whole team.
Mhm.
But it's definitely helped me organize, because I did not get that when I took over. I did not get any of that type of mentorship from the previous owner as far as how to run a business. So
Great
very helpful.
advice. Great advice. Now, what are some potential pitfalls that you experienced as a new business owner, and how should we prepare for them so we can avoid them?
Oh gosh, pitfalls. This is a good one. I think that, for me, this was an established company. So it had been started in 1980. And I started in 1991. So it was only about 11 years old when I started with the company. Now we're on our 44th year, right, in business. So, I mean, business is cyclical. So there's always going to be different pitfalls. We've had different things in 1980 than we had in 90 and 2000, and obviously 2020 through a whole big, wrench for all of us. I think that avoiding I think it's hard to avoid a pitfall. I think if you don't know what you don't know, sometimes you find yourself in a pitfall, right? Does that make sense? Or on the slope and you're sliding and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? For me, I would say that I have definitely walked into some things I probably wasn't fully aware of and wanted to bring in other people's opinions, right? And I'm cautious with the only way I can let people learn is to step a little bit out of the way as the owner and watch the change happen. So sometimes we've gone into some pitfalls because I have purposefully let some people do some things, right? And take a couple steps forward for a learning curve, and then had to kind of step in, kind of like a motherly thing. You kind of let your kids do it, and then that didn't work out so well, and then you got to pull back. But as long as you can learn from them, I guess I like to find the challenge. What was it? Make sure we document it. I have this analogy I call my backpack. So as we go through life, you throw all kinds of things in your backpack, and it just prepares you for the next step where you go. I can pull some things out of my backpack because I've experienced it, or because I put myself around people that have had a pitfall that I have been then around and they've told me. So that might be in the other side of my backpack that's like, ooh, I remember so-and-so talking about this. Maybe I should call them so that I can avoid it, right? For me, it's been invaluable really to connect within this network of people and learn from them. The most valuable thing was jumping into these organizations where I surround myself with people who have done things that I haven't done, that have done things differently than I've done them, and really just absorb from them like a sponge. And it really helps you navigate, right? So that you avoid some of those pitfalls. But pitfalls are good. I mean, if you don't learn from them, right? Like if it just always was perfect.
Right. If we do we need to learn from those
Yes.
pitfalls. So tell us about mentors on your journey. How did they impact the leader you are today?
Interesting question. As far as mentors, I am in a highly male-dominated field in construction, demolition, having construction managers around, right, and doing heavy renovation and construction and demolition work. That's where a lot of the hazardous materials comes into play. The other side of what we do as far as industrial hygiene or employee exposure monitoring happens a lot in general industry. So in a lot of organizations like the Ford Motor Company or Steelcase or Whirlpool, you think of those big companies. Indoor air quality happens in any kind of building, or it can be an office building. So I have this really highly male-dominated area because health and safety, facilities, and construction are really male roles. So very early on, probably in 2010 or so, I was searching kind of for a female mentor, just someone that looked like me in this field, right? Like, I was part of the West Michigan Industrial Hygiene Society, and really I was the youngest one at the time. And so there were these very established people in front of me. But when I look back, it was like there's not very many women, and they certainly weren't young. And so I raised 5 kids doing this field. So I was pregnant on lifts, and I was like, where is me? Where are those people that look like me? I really in my life found one person that is part of safety services here in Kalamazoo, and a woman that owned the business. Now, I didn't know really how unique that was then. I didn't know that. Now I know that. But I didn't know it then. And I just called her and I was like, I just want to talk to somebody. I just want to see a woman. I want to hear what that is. And so I really did seek her out. I don't think I stalked her, but I really do think I seeked her out and was like, I just don't see me, right? I'm always talking to men and we think different. And so, so we did some lunches and things like that. I did find then a male mentor in more of the business section where I needed to understand business. So I seek that out maybe in it was probably 2017 or so, a few years before I took over, but totally different a different background. I really haven't had a single mentor. I think I've just tried to search out people and take little bits from everyone. And so I strive to be much more of a mentor for people now. Like purposefully, Julie does that for people because it's just really hard. I just didn't know of women I didn't have these connections that I do now. Had I had them before, right? It wasn't important to the previous owner to connect in the same way. So I want to get that word out much differently because there's so much more power in having a mentor, so much more power. Yeah.
There is. And we are actually our first cohort for a program we call Mentor We was in person prior to the pandemic. It was all about construction. And be happy to introduce you to some of those people too, if
Yeah.
you have not met them already. I think you know Tiffany because you're on the same the WBE Forum, but it's and Gwen. But great just to be in a room with, as you say, people like-minded and that look like you, because you have different needs perhaps than
You
the gentleman.
navigate differently. You
Right.
navigate your world differently, and
You have
and
to.
and it's yes, and it's not about it's a male-dominated field. It doesn't mean that I have not gained a lot of knowledge from a lot of my male counterparts. I mean, they're wonderful people. It's just that they weren't pregnant, right? They weren't pregnant and having morning sickness, right? And like, excuse me, I need to go here and I'll be back in a little bit. And, or even people saying, oh, you shouldn't be out here, right? You shouldn't be out here because you're pregnant. I'm like, well, I'm not, I don't have an illness. I'm just pregnant. It's like, I'll be safe. And just navigating that, right? Or then nursing during the times when you have a child, I had to navigate that. So, but it's okay now, right? It's so different now than it was in the 90s. So
Yeah, it's not just that just blows my mind because I grew up in this, as a teenager in the 70s, and I thought Gloria Steinem took care of everything and everything was good. And I've always felt like I could do whatever I wanted to do, that there were no boundaries, except within my own mind or whatever I wanted to do, that nobody else was going to put boundaries on me, but that isn't the case. And even as you said, even as recent as when you had your children, you were overcoming not just business norms, but societal norms where men or society in general thought that women were somewhat in an ill space when they were carrying a child, when in fact it's just a natural process and
you
something that
couldn't be on
happens.
a
And that
construction
doesn't mean
site and be
we saw.
pregnant. Yeah.
I mean, just think about having your newborn babies and how many things you can do one-handed.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, we always adapt and we make things work, and we're able to have so many things on our plate. And probably that's more of a problem than actually doing what we need to do, because we take on more and we just try to do it all ourselves, which is probably
Exactly.
what makes you an excellent business owner. So I think we may have touched on this, but I'm going to ask it because we do talk a little bit in the cohort. We're going to talk about advisory committees and boards. I've heard you talk about perhaps advisors. Do you have a committee or a board that does that for you?
We do not. We do not have any. So we do not have an advisory board. I don't have anybody. I just really, it has been some of the people that I've met through, like even Great Lakes, right? I also did the Goldman Sachs program, 10,000 Small Businesses, which also then gave me like a business advisor. But that was just last year. So there are sometimes I can reach out to them. And I've used some fractional people, so a fractional CFO and a fractional CIO.
Wow.
So I have brought them into the business and invested, because that is definitely an investment if you're looking at that. But I truly believe you don't know what you don't know. And I can sense it. I can feel it should be a different way, but that's what they do, right? So sometimes it's just nice to have those people in. And so now, I would say that's kind of how I've created how I navigate through things, but we're too small and I don't have an advisory board at all. So
Okay, thank you for sharing that though, but you have sought advisors out, and I like that you shared that you invested in these fractional C-level roles to assist you. That's a very wise move, and appreciate that you shared it. What resources, and you've mentioned some of them like Goldman Sachs, what resources within the community or in the Women's Business Network have you used outside of Great Lakes Women's Business Council and the Goldman Sachs?
So you're becoming certified right off the bat, right? And actually being certified during COVID, which I didn't know was going to happen, right? So in 2020, I took over, I was 100% owner in 2020. So I had attended a couple meetings outside because I'd heard about Great Lakes Women's Business Council. So I had attended some meetings over in Battle Creek at Firekeepers because I'm over in Portage. And so I knew this was there. I really didn't know what it was, right? So when I became, I became owner, then COVID hit. So other than navigating COVID and the PPP loans and all the things that you had to do to try to figure out how am I going to maintain this company I just purchased, right? I started, as soon as COVID hit, I decided this is a great opportunity to get certified and get certified right now. So once I went through the process with WeBank, I dived into absolutely everything that was available online. So I would recommend, right? I mean, people now, there's a lot still online, and it allows you to kind of listen, to sit back and hear what's going on. So I jumped in that way really, really fast and did a couple of what we called WeSips at that point. So I had a chance to, like Ann Martinelli from Aristio, like I was able to meet her on a WeSip, right? Like when would I have done that before, right? These more intimate kind of one-on-ones with people. So I jumped into some of that and asked a lot of questions. Then got more involved in Great Lakes Women's, like going to the meetings. The Goldman Sachs program was just last year and was actually recommended to me at the conference in September of 2022, the Great Lakes Women's Business Conference that we have in Novi. I was sitting at a table and someone said, have you heard of that? And you should do this. And I went from there to my hotel room where I was staying and I applied. And so I wouldn't have known about it if it hadn't been through Great Lakes, right through the event. Locally here, Southwest Michigan First is an organization that is in my backyard here, and I've started to get a little more involved in what they offer into the community. But they also have changed. I like to stay, I'll say, in the DEI space. I think that what I've found as a small business and as a woman-owned business is that there's power with our groups. We look out for each other. And so any organization that's going to have that focus of understanding why we have boundaries that we do have to overcome, they're not excuses. They're just obstacles and boundaries that we have to navigate slightly different. And I appreciate that because I'll be honest, when I started, I didn't want to be certified because I didn't want to be treated different. I had no idea that this was just an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity and it's still what I make of it and I still want to be qualified. So I get involved with those Southwest Michigan First because they have really changed the way they approach their DEI in the community. So they didn't used to be that way and they are now with the current leadership. So those are basically where I navigate. That's a lot of time between those organizations.
And actually, I met you at a WeSip. And for those of you who don't know what that is, when the pandemic hit, we needed a way to connect to women business owners. And so we did just a real casual, bring your beverage, let's talk. We might do a little fun assignment or learn how to use something differently. Like we learned how to use the whiteboard and LinkedIn and things like that. And that's how I met you, Julie. So it's been a pleasure to have met you too. So you are a co-chair of the Great Lakes Women's Business Council's WBE Forum on the West Michigan side. Are there other ways that you give back? And how do you feel that impacts your business when you give back?
So that is the organization, being I think I had to be certified for 3 years before I could join in. And I remember last April hunting you down to say, okay, I'm ready. I want to do this now, because I wanted to start to bring this information to the west side of the state slightly differently than it's being presented now. So yes, I remember hunting you down saying, okay, I gotta get involved. How do I get involved? I think that I'm not sure how I want to answer this question carefully, because people, it just by joining something doesn't mean that I promote my business per se, or that I have gained revenue from the business, right? Like I think that sometimes just joining something to gain something, maybe financially, isn't always the best reason to join something. I have joined every organization to help me grow personally. And I think that, and to connect with people. I'm definitely a connector, I'm definitely an extrovert. But I think that, I also say everything happens for a reason. So the way I have connected with such wonderful people, I mean, right now, when you say that, I'm not sure I can actually think of how my business has received revenue per se from the connections I've made so far. But I do know that even just learning last week in our event that we had, there's this cycle of 3 to 5 years for a lot of these corporates, that when you have a supplier diversity, contact, and there's maybe a contract, that there's this cycle of getting to know them and seeing them, and then having opportunities to bid within their corporations and the companies, right? And learning how to connect with the right people within the organizations, the other members, to join up and to be able to, go in together for bid opportunities.
Let's talk about corporate social responsibility. We were kind of headed in that direction when we started talking about giving back. And right now, it's really important to our corporate buyers that as business owners, we do something for the community. And at the very least of these would be to say you don't have a big initiative, but perhaps you do a recycling of the paper in your organization, ESG, environmental, social, or governance. So the very business that you're in really contributes to that. But do you practice it outside of your, like, for instance, do something for the community or practice it within
Yeah.
the office?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously by what we do environmentally, right, we're environmentally responsible. We always are looking at ways to recycle, right, reduce, reuse. That's part of what we do. A lot of the LEED certification projects, recycling concrete materials that come from the buildings that we're working in. So, and the ethical responsibility, right, where we are dealing with EPA and OSHA regulations daily. So those things kind of keep us in that track. But philanthropically, really, for me, it's a hunger initiative. So one of the things when I took over was making sure the basic needs, right, we're about creating safe work. So creating safe work really it involves what you do when you go to work, but how do you come to work? And a basic need of hunger, which is personal to me, growing up poor, and understanding not having, food insecurities. And I think it's something that's not talked about a lot, and it doesn't always look like people you think it is. And so, and if you're hungry, you can't focus. And if you're hungry, you don't learn when you go to school, right? We hear it more, but I came from a family who didn't want to go out and get those basic needs out there. They didn't want the help because it was a stigma, a social stigma. So, for me, I wanted to be able to take over the company and be able to have that social impact in the communities that we live and we work in. So we have different locations that we support in the areas that we live and work. And I do look at the way that they use their money the best. I look for matching opportunities to donate money. We look for volunteer opportunities. We're a small group, so I give everybody 8 hours of volunteer time to use however they want throughout the year. So individually, everybody has a time that they can go and spend that they're paid. And then as a company, we support financially many food banks in the areas that we live and work. And then we also find ways throughout the year to give back to organizations with what we actually do. So there was a recent veterans building that's being renovated. So we went and did the survey, free time, and then they just pay for like sample analysis, the stuff for the lab. So we're constantly looking for ways to touch things. And all of my employees know that if a job comes in, it's the potential where we could offer our services at a discounted or free, that we look for those as well, just to try to give back and do our part. So.
Wow. Thank you for sharing your story. I'm sure it touches some of the listeners that we have out there. Do you have a formal recognition program with formal values that are on the walls or in the hands of the employees?
Do have a because EOS has our core values and our core focus, so we do identify those, and we have some. We haven't started giving them all. We've just kind of got EOS all the way through our company. So we talk about them though in every meeting that we have, and but we don't have a thoroughly established recognition program. We have quarterly reviews, so we go through all of the core values and our purpose, and make sure that our people are the right people in the right seats, which is an EOS kind of term. But so we don't have it where we recognize them, but we're moving towards that. So.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. And that answered the next question. And here's our final question. When it comes to being an inspirational leader of your team, creating a culture of success and giving back, what is one last thought you'd like to leave with our business owners today?
This one is do what you say. Do what you say. I think being a true, authentic leader, building a good culture of people who want to work around you, with you, work with the right customers. I think it's really important. I say as a consultant, we pick who we want to work with, meaning we pick the employees that we want to work with, right? Because they meet our core values and they look like, they're going to back us up. And we also pick our customers that way as well. As a consultant, we have the opportunity or choice to do a second job with people. And if they don't really meet those core values, then we have the opportunity to say no. And we have said no before. And so I think ultimately it's do what you say. As the leader of the company, I should be held accountable to do what I say. I love change, that's not a common thing for people to love change, but I also understand that we have to change for a reason, and to be very communicative with my team about why we need to make certain changes at times or why things have to happen, being transparent. And I also don't believe in having anyone do anything I wouldn't do. So I think it's do what you say, right? Like I have been in their shoes. I wouldn't ask them to do something I wouldn't do. I think that's the short and simple message, is do what you say.
Well, thank you for your time today. You are an inspirational leader. You do give back. To hear your story and how you're incorporating that into your organization and giving employees 8 hours a year to volunteer to an organization of their choice. I just love that. And you went right away into the organization. So I think there's a lot of lessons that you've given us today to reinforce what we're doing in the Launch You program. We just want to thank you for giving us your time today.
Oh, you're welcome. Wonderful. Yes, and feel free to reach out, anybody, if they have questions after, they watch this. I'm sure you'll give them the contact information, but they can feel free to reach out too.
Absolutely. I'll make sure they get it with the email that comes with the link to this.
Awesome.
And Julie likes it when you communicate with her, so please give her some
And I
questions,
want to
feedback.
see you at meetings. If you see me at a meeting, right, please come up and
Right.
introduce yourself, because I won't have seen who is on this Launch You. So you will see
And,
me at Great Lakes meetings, so please come up.
and based on what you told us, another thing I wanted to point out was she does go to meetings, and that's how she meets people, and that's how she gets a mentor, and that's how she learns what is available, like Goldman Sachs 10,000 small businesses. So that's a lesson right there. You have to be in it to win it. This is what I like
Yes.
to say. So thanks
Yep.
for all the
It is
wisdom
what you
you've
put
given us.
into it. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. It doesn't just happen, right?
Correct.
All
Correct.
right.
You'll have to
Well,
put in.
thanks again, Julie, and meet up
Awesome.
with Julie. You'll learn more about her, and you'll be glad you did. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.